Good morning to you. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. I am in North Platte, Nebraska. I'll explain why that is at the end of today's update. But first, we have two areas that we are watching in the Atlantic now. Things beginning to look a lot more interesting, possibly going to have some impacts to land areas from both systems. And the one there in the tropical Atlantic, I think that one has the most weight in terms of what it could mean for the rest of the hurricane season. Here we are at the latter part of June, and we're talking about an area potentially developing out in the main development region, one of those signs that we have been looking for to see if we are indeed on track to have this very busy season that we have been told and certainly led to believe by all the different signs that are out there that we're going to have this very big season. I think this is a part of that. All right, so we'll take a look at that, and then of course the severe weather that I encountered yesterday and what we're looking at in terms of today and the next few days. We'll do that at the end of today's update, including a 2-minute montage of just some incredible video that I got from yesterday. But first, let's talk tropics, because that is definitely top of mind right now. Let's start off here with a post from Jeff Baradelli, and this is very good, very well put. It's that time of year, absolutely, that we start paying closer attention to the deep tropical Atlantic. However, it normally isn't quite this time of year that we normally do this. Yet this year, it apparently is. Normally we wait until later in July and into August, but these last few years, the deep tropics have become more and more active earlier and earlier. So, and as he says, it's a bit early for that area. I added the bit part, but yeah, it's early for that area, but development can happen beyond the next Yucatan system, which is this one right in here. There are two waves out east. Both of those bear watching. The ensemble's picking up one there and another one here. So in total, I guess you could say we have 3 areas that we need to watch, but there's 2, and I'll just highlight it in black here, that we really need to watch closely. There's the first cluster. This is the second one. I mean, you can number them any way you want to. Maybe the one on the left is the first one in your mind. But we do have to watch this very closely because of the background state being so favorable. Looking at the National Hurricane Center homepage, there's our 2 yellow X's as we look at the 7-day outlook here. And this really shows you, too, the pattern. Why would everything be so far to the south like this? Very easy to understand. There's a pretty stout ridge of high pressure. This is an oversimplification of it. It's not completely solid like that. But we do have pretty stout ridging in place, very large area of air over the Atlantic right now, big high pressure. We call it the Bermuda Azores High. And so these systems are going to track westward instead of finding a weakness and just turning out to sea like that. That is more typical of what we see in an El Nino year like last year. We all remember how most of the activity was out here somewhere in this area, with the exception, of course, of Idalia, however you pronounce it, that came into the Big Bend area of Florida. This year looks a lot different as that big old Azores Bermuda High sets up and keeps systems moving generally west. Not all of them are going to do that. Eventually you're going to get these troughs coming down, and we're going to have so much activity that some will turn out to sea. But currently, these 2 systems here looking like they're going to travel west for quite a while. And so our friends down here, let's highlight this in red, in the windwards and leewards, Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, elsewhere, you're going to need to watch this eastern system very closely, because several days down the road, we could get some impacts in your area. We'll address that as we move forward. All right, so here's the satellite imagery for today, and nothing looks really threatening right now. But remember, we're talking 5 to 7 days out. The computer models have gotten good enough that we can look at areas that look innocuous now and say, okay, in a few days, 5 to 7 days, the environment could be better. This is the first system right in here. It is starting to flare up just a little bit. Where is it doing so? Right there near the longitude of Jamaica, which is right here. And we suspected that that would happen. Danny Morris, the CPA from Florida that I mentioned yesterday, I believe he pointed that out. He knows what he's talking about. The Eastern Caribbean here is typically not a development area for tropical systems due to different factors that I don't want to spend a lot of time on today. Just know that this is typically the graveyard of tropical systems. They don't really get going there, but farther to the west, absolutely. And so there you go. We're starting to see some convection fire up with this system, which I believe is 94L. So we'll put a 94 here if I can draw it in there. So there's 94L. This is the other system. It's far down in the deep tropics. That's about 10 degrees latitude right there. So it's at a low latitude, very warm water, south of the Saharan air, which is all up in here. Dry, mid-level, dusty air, kind of putting a cap. Storm chasers know all about the cap, right? You have that in the tropics too. You've got to have instability, cold air over warm air. If everything's uniform, there's no weather. There's no imbalance. That's all weather is the difference in heat and cold. And then you throw in humidity, moisture, that kind of thing, latent heat, and all other stuff related to thermodynamics, and you've got weather. Over the tropics, when you get that warm layer over a warm ocean and the warm boundary layer down there, nothing really happens because everything is basically uniform. But this system is far enough south that it is not under the influence, too much so, of the Saharan air layer or the SAL, and that is why, among other reasons, the GFS especially is picking up on it and really running with it very quickly. So looking at the vorticity signature, one of my favorite things to look at when we're trying to figure out what might happen. And I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why I use this. There's 94L. It's nice and round. That's got the look. This is the other system. This will eventually be 95L. You can see as well as I can, it's round. The energy is bundled. It's also fairly small. And that's going to help it in some regard maintain itself as it stays sort of low down here and stays away from the Saharan air layer up to the north. Smaller systems can ramp up very quickly. They can also die off very quickly, so that could go either way. But man, the GFS especially really likes this system, and we'll look at it closer in just a moment. So here's a great post from Eric Webb, and I mean, this really sums it up, folks. By late June, early July standards, the overall environment looks unusually conducive for tropical development over the east central MDR, main development region, next week. A few easterly waves, those are tropical waves, will get tangled up with a pair of convectively coupled Kelvin waves. So in case you're new to this whole thing, what is he saying? What is that convectively coupled Kelvin wave? It is a smaller area geographically, spatially in the atmosphere, of favorable conditions. It kind of comes along and only lasts for a few days, and it leaves in its wake a much more favorable environment, more moisture, less shear, more convergence, instead of a larger scale Madden-Julian oscillation that can be much wider in its spatial existence and its, how long it lasts as well. The MJO can be a couple weeks long sometimes, and it takes a long time for it to kind of move through a region. But then you have these convectively coupled Kelvin waves, meaning that the convection is coupled with them, and they move along through the atmosphere, and they sort of supercharge a very short area geographically relative to the planet as a whole, and they leave a favorable wake in there, as they go by, right? So we can see that on some of these diagrams here, if you know what you're looking for. The green is good, basically, for tropical development. And then other posts that Eric has made here, very favorable shear profiles, all this blue, and I'll highlight it in green if I can do so, yellow, green, whatever, all of this in here, that is favorable as well. Very unusual to see this early in the season, all right? And then the rest of this, look at the moisture out there, the precipitable water, look at all that moisture despite the Saharan air layer. A lot of environmental conditions coming together to lead us to believe that we do have something to watch in the deep tropics. And the other part, and you knew I was going to show this, the very favorable sea surface temperature profile. We've talked about it ad nauseum here for months and months. That is the classic horseshoe look. There is your almost La Nina coming in, certainly no El Nino, and I think that is what is more important, that there's just no El Nino. and that we do have these colder anomalies in here, reduces the wind shear coming out of the eastern Pacific. We've had no name storms in the East Pac, and we might get a name storm in here. That would be Beryl, and we might get a name storm somewhere through here. I think, what is it, Chris this year? Wow. And here we go. This is what we thought might happen. So here's the GFS, and here's what I want you to pay attention to. I'm going to use black here to highlight it. That is the piece of energy sitting out here with our system that will eventually be 95L. This is the energy with our system that is currently 94L. I think the vorticity signature is better in reality than what the GFS is depicting, for what it's worth, with 94. I'll just kind of show it to you right here. It's right there. See it? I don't want to take away my circles. But yeah, I think the Vort Max down there, the vorticity maximum, is better in reality than the GFS depicted it. So maybe it is already ahead of where the GFS was quote-unquote thinking. But whatever, it doesn't matter too much. I just like looking at things like that. So let's move this out into time, and you can see what happens. I mean, look, the first system down there, 94L, GFS doesn't do a lot with it, admittedly. It kind of gets in there, the extreme southern Bay of Campeche, and then it tries to go on into the East Pac. But what I want to do is really draw your attention to what happens through this area right here with eventually what's going to be 94L. The GFS ramps it up quickly, very quickly down there, and I think I can zoom in if Dr. Cowan, I want to make sure, I mean, he earned that degree. He is Dr. Cowan. Yeah, here we go, the tropical Atlantic. So this is really, really important. Let's go back to the initial set of conditions here. There is our piece of energy, or, pocket of energy, whatever you want to call it, right there. And look what happens just over the next 48 hours. In 48 hours, the GFS says that it's going to be fairly well organized down there. I mean, that's incredible for this early in the deep tropical Atlantic season. By 72 hours, that's a bona fide tropical cyclone in the model. By day 4, it's well on its way there, and as we move into day 5 and 6, yes, it could be a threat to the Windward Islands down here. So we have to watch this very, very closely. This is not 10 days out model fantasy land. Is the GFS right? Hey, I have no idea, because I don't know the future. But we've looked at the parameters that suggest that this could happen, and then, as if that wasn't enough, you see as well as I do, another one possibly. If we get 3 developments over the next week, that would really indicate to me we are on track to have a very busy hurricane season, and it should serve as a massive wake-up call to everybody that, look, the science was right. The season that was predicted to be very active, especially if we get 2 systems developing in the deep tropics as we end June and get into the first part of July. It is very, very rare. It's not unprecedented, but it's very rare to have that happen, especially, too, if they were to become, and I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, hurricanes. We'll wait and see about that. But if that happens, that's a whole different situation. It really is. So we'll be watching this very closely for obvious reasons. Looking at it from the ensemble perspective, this is the GFS ensemble, and I want you to pay attention to 2 areas, one over here, and then the other one is just this corridor right through here. Watch how all the members, remember what I said yesterday, the operational is like the conductor, this is the rest of the orchestra, and look at that clustering down here, very, very evident. Also a little bit of it in the Western Caribbean. I think the Euro is more aggressive with 94L, but we'll get to that momentarily. But yeah, look at all those members there in the Atlantic approaching the Lesser Antilles in a few days. That is quite the signal from the GEFS. And if we run this out to a week, basically this shows all the different members. There's one there. These are all the different possibilities from the ensemble group, which basically looks at the what-if scenario, and you get to visualize it. What about the ensembles from the Euro? Same kind of thing. The big clustering down there in the deep tropics. And worth noting, several members here in the southwest Gulf Bay of Campeche. So we might have one system here, another one here, and a little bit of a signal of that other system that the GFS is latching onto. We'll see. Very interesting times coming up indeed. All right, so I am, like I said at the beginning, in North Platte, Nebraska, wrapping up our first year of the hail project, studying hail up close and personal, and yesterday was my biggest success to date. Looking at baseballs coming down right in front of me, hitting the Tacoma. Gosh, it was unbelievable. I was up there basically near Seneca. I almost said North Dakota. I'm in North Platte. Seneca, Nebraska. Just kind of out in the middle of, I won't say nowhere because it's beautiful country, but not a big town or anything like that. And a low precipitation supercell came in, and I got right in the hail core, perfectly positioned, in large part thanks to my friend Taylor Trogdon, longtime friend of mine. He used to be at the National Hurricane Center, and he loves forecasting this stuff, and he basically said, go to Valentine, Nebraska, and you should strike gold. I was on my way up there. That cell developed, moved south-southeast, and I got it. And what I want to do is I want to show you some video from that, from yesterday. It's about 2 minutes. Bear with me. If you're into this stuff, check it out. If you're not, hey, I get it. You can tune out now. That's no problem. This is what it looked like. This is the mammatus structure. Let's drop me out. Mammatus clouds, that is very indicative of quite a bit of instability, that rolling nature to the clouds. I even tweeted that it reminded me of being in a Steven Spielberg movie. Remember Close Encounters of the Third Kind when the clouds would kind of boil down? That special effect that they did? Yep, those are mammatus clouds, a sure sign of some severe weather, and you certainly don't want to fly a plane through that. Holy cow, that would result in some problems for sure. This is what mammatus looks like in time lapse as the storm was moving on. I'll show you the hail encounter in just a moment here. There it is. So a lot of golf balls there. This is from the Tacoma, from inside. Of course, I've got cameras on the outside, and you can hear the hail guard getting pounded. This is early, and then this is when it really ramped up. There's a few baseballs there. And remember, this is a GoPro. Let me pause this for a second. This is a GoPro, so the field of view is very wide. That's the size of a baseball right there. There's one right there for sure. So they weren't everywhere. There's a big one right there, another baseball. Everything else was golf ball and quarters and then fragments of other pieces. But look at those baseballs. There's a good one right there, just rolling across. It was absolutely incredible. This is what it looked like from inside the Tacoma. A few baseballs out there on the pavement. Hood got a few more dents on it, but the windshield and everything else nice and protected. You can see the hail guard right here. It is massive, covers most of the vehicle, including the windshield. Then, and you guys probably saw this, there was a supercell that dropped a substantial tornado at Whitman, I think it is, Nebraska. That is that supercell coming towards North Platte after the tornado had come and gone. And, for us in North Platte, thank goodness. So this is a time lapse that I did from the GoPro up on the hail guard. The next sequence you'll see is the same supercell from down on the brush guard from a GoPro. Look at all that lightning. There it is from a lower angle shot. And then, of course, I had to put the drone up and see this thing coming in. Look at that. I was explaining to a couple that had come over, an older couple. They were asking me, hey, what are you doing? And I said, that's a supercell right there. And that thing dropped a tornado when it was way back, 40 miles to the north or whatever. And I explained about how it's a rotating updraft, and there's mammatus clouds all in here and hail falling there. What an amazing night. What an amazing day. Severe weather, yes, it can be very disruptive and impactful and even deadly. But, come on. That is absolutely spectacular to see. And I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. Again, in large part thanks to my friend Taylor. So thank you, Taylor. So what about today? Today I will be heading over. There's 3 yellow areas. Well, I'm right here in North Platte, somewhere in there. So I'm going to be going up to this area in here, probably northeast Colorado. That seems to be the magical area for huge hail events. Yuma in that area. Maybe western Nebraska, we'll see. If we look at the hail risk for today, that seems to indicate where I need to be, is basically northeastern Colorado. And then for tomorrow, which will wrap up the final expedition of our first year of studying hail, we're going to be up here, and I like that area right there, probably going to be in Montana. And I'm going to be joined by one of our supporters, a good friend of the project, Scott Finney's going to be flying out to Rapid City tonight, and he's really going to help me the drive back. I mean, I've got a long way to go from Montana tomorrow back to North Carolina over the next several days, because we've got to start really thinking about hurricane season. So today and tomorrow, 2 more days to intercept and encounter some hail. You know, for the sake of my project, I'm hoping I can get baseball or bigger, but the big problem is getting out and retrieving the stones to measure them before they melt. So we're going to probably go to Lowe's or something and get a couple of hard hats and some face goggles or whatever, not in the middle of it, but as soon as it's starting to die down, run out there, grab a big stone, and if a wayward baseball conks us on the head, it'll hit the helmet. It's just hard, you know, like we can't wear a catcher's outfit everywhere. I've seen a couple of people do that years ago. But it's a fascinating part of severe weather, very damaging, and I've learned a lot from it. I'm going to do a special podcast episode of our Hail Project podcast a couple weeks from now, just to wrap things up. Hopefully get Ian Giamanco on as well, maybe Sean Waugh, who's studying hail from NSSL's perspective, I think it is, and Dr. Giamanco, of course, with IBHS. Just a lot of stuff going on in the world of weather. But for now, our main focus, of course, will be the tropics, and I've already gone over all of that. We'll watch and see how things evolve. Stay on top of it. You know who to trust out there in terms of good sources. Stick with that, and you shall be fine. All right? I'll be out looking for storms today, but of course, I will be posting a video tomorrow, and then again on Friday. All right? So we'll stay with you throughout this, especially as things really start to ramp up. From all of us at HurricaneTrack, we appreciate you tuning in. I'm Mark Sudduth signing off from North Platte, Nebraska. I'll see you again tomorrow.